Hi, my name is Dustin Petz, and I serve as the president of the Kansas Area United Methodist Foundation. I want to share with you a presentation that we often are asked to present to congregations and to persons across the state of Kansas about ways that you can give generously to further the ministry of your local congregation or to support other ministries that you care about. It's often called the 5 ways to give generously, and I want to share that with you through this video venue. My name, as I said, is Dustin Petz. I've served as a United Methodist pastor both in Kansas and Nebraska since 2000. And in 2018, I took this role leading the United Methodist Foundation here in Kansas. Our foundation has been around since the mid-60s. Largely, we're about helping individuals leave a lasting legacy, helping persons to be generous with their resources in life, and then also to leave a legacy through their congregation or in partnership with us. A portion of the resources that we care for are ones where individuals have used us to support their local church and other ministries more broadly across the state. So this presentation is coming to you, hoping to provide a means of delivering it to you in ways that are helpful. There are other resources on our website. We'd love for you to learn there. If you have questions, please contact us. We would be honored to visit with you and help you to find ways to give generously, that through your resources you can change lives and make a lasting difference to push your values into the future. I'm going to move through this presentation, and it really starts with thinking about ways we can give generously now, and then moves towards how we can, through our estate plan and our charitable giving at the end of our life journey, leave a lasting legacy to be a blessing for those persons of our church and those persons of our community who will come after us. The place I want to start is the first way to give, which is giving now. This is probably where our congregations are the strongest. We often ask for individuals to support the life of the church in a more regular cash way, thinking of our annual stewardship process and inviting persons to give. I know that there have been new interests and new needs for thinking about how do we do this more regularly? How do we do this through ACH or electronic funds transfers? And finding ways to make that online and reoccurring giving happen more easily. We have to figure out the different ways to help people to give to support the life of the church or other ministries that we care about. You'll see on the slide here with me that there are other ways, which includes when a Schedule F farmer gives the gift of grain at the elevator. You have to give the grain before it's sold, give it to the church or to a charitable cause, and it can make a difference in your taxes and for supporting a ministry. A couple other areas that I want to talk about are two that are really important, most especially because of tax consequences and changes that happened 2 years ago in 2018 with our change of standard deviation for taxes. The one of which is related to IRAs. And so on this next slide, you'll see that there are often a required minimum distribution that people are asked to make out of their IRA. Here in 2020, I understand that that has been suspended in part because of the pandemic, but for most folk, there is a time. Now, you'll see on this slide that there's both a number over on the right-hand side, a number of 70 and a half, which was the old number, the age at which a person who had an IRA was required to start taking a distribution. They actually increased that in the Secures Act in late 2019 to 72 for new folk. And so it may be different for different folk, but at some point in time, if you have an IRA, you have a requirement to start taking a distribution of that resource. Some folk decide to receive it as income. They need it for supporting their living, and that's wonderful. And for some of those, they'll take and receive that resource as income, but they don't get the whole amount of it because they have to pay tax. So when you bring it out of your IRA, a portion of it, a percentage of it, is taken out of tax. So let's pretend you seek to draw out $10,000, and maybe that will meet the requirement, the RMD. But when you actually receive that money, you're not going to get $10,000. You're going to get something more like $8,000 if it's a 20% tax bracket that you're in. If you want to give to your church, that's a good pool of resources to give. But if you were planning to give to your congregation, another consideration is on this next slide, and that is doing what's called a qualified charitable distribution from your IRA. For many folk, it will meet a portion or all of the requirement for the RMD. And what's most powerful is that you can avoid the tax. So it's, instead of receiving it as an individual, you contact the administrator of your IRA for a traditional IRA, and you ask them to make a qualified charitable distribution straight to your church or to some other charitable cause. And what's nice is that it will count towards the RMD requirement, but the tax component will not be taken out. So going back to our previous example, if a person was planning to give $8,000 to their church, hypothetically, and they pulled out 10 out of their IRA, they actually could give the whole $10,000 in a qualified charitable distribution to their church. So in some ways, you can grow the amount of resources that you're giving to your church, and you can avoid the tax, and you can make a significant difference while still meeting the required minimum distribution. I have money in a 403B, and so for persons who are 403B or 401K, this practice does not work. The only way that you could move into this kind of thing is to do a rollover into a traditional IRA. But for many folk, they have a traditional IRA, and they can avoid tax. They can give generously to their church and meet the various kind of requirements. And so it doesn't count as part of your income, nor do you get to do a deduction on it. So you don't get to double dip in a sense, but you can make a lasting difference in this way to give now. Another consideration that helps families to give more generously is to consider giving the gift of stock. We talked briefly about gift of grain. Persons can give the gift of stock to a congregation. Oftentimes you might need to use us as the foundation to help service this, but it allows you to avoid the capital gains that you would have had to pay the tax on the capital gains of the stock. So if you purchase the stock at $50 per share and now it's $80 per share, you're going to have to pay capital gains on the growth of that stock. But if you give the stock to the foundation, we are able to liquidate it and give the resource to your congregation. We do not charge any fee for this service. There's a slight fee for the actual transaction, but it's very minimal. And for appreciated stocks, this is a great way to make a difference and to support a particular ministry. A second whole way that I want to look at this, second option, is kind of a way to give, but also these next two are ways to give but have life income for the remainder of your life. So some folk have a resource, but they don't need the resource in the same way, but they still do need income from it. And so we're going to look at two of those. There's lots of different kinds of trusts that are available, and this is one I want to lift up, is called a charitable remainder unit trust. And it's where you give appreciated assets. It could be stocks, it could be land, it could be equipment, farm equipment. That's where oftentimes this comes into place. There's a farmer who has farm equipment or a piece of property that has been depreciated in some fashion and no longer need it in the same way. But if they were to sell it, they would have a lot of capital gains or recapture of depreciation of that piece of property. And so they work with us, and we can create a charitable remainder unit trust, which creates the trust. Here, let's actually look at the graphic here. You create this trust, you give the resource to it in its original form, appreciated stock or farm equipment or land or some other thing. The trust then will sell it, and the trust won't have to pay the capital gains or the recapture of depreciation. You'll get a charitable deduction. It won't be the full value, but you'll get some charitable deduction. You'll get a life income for the remainder of your life or for a certain number of years, depending on how you set it up. And then at the end of that time period, either a set number of years or the end of a two-person's life, if it's set up that way, the remainder of it can go to support a charitable cause, can go into a long-term permanent fund to support your church or some other ministry that you care about. It's a way to accomplish multiple things and to be able to give generously and have life income from that resource. Now, if you don't have life income needs, that is, you have income being generated from other sources and there's not really a need to have that income, then you might simply consider making a charitable gift and give that land or that farm equipment or something to the foundation or to some entity. You'll get a bigger charitable deduction, and you'll be able to make a more significant difference for those entities that you support. A third option that we offer through the foundation is a charitable gift annuity. This is similar to a charitable remainder unit trust, but it's simpler. It's where we receive a cash gift or a stock gift. We receive a resource and are able to establish an agreement with the giver to where you'll receive an annuity payment, an annual dollar amount every year for the remainder of your life. And you're able to use that resource for life. It's a means of life income for you. At the end of life, whatever is remaining in this account will go to support the charitable cause that you care about. So you get a portion of deduction when you make the gift, and then you get some of that annual contribution that comes to that annual income is taxed at ordinary income, and a portion of it is not through a certain set of number of years. But this is a great way to get a better return on your dollars if you are able to make a charitable gift. Now, if you might need that money coming up, this may not be the best option, but the rate of return is much better than you're going to get with a CD or some other investment, and it isn't subject to the risk that we have in our markets. The slide here shows that based on age, so the older you get, the higher the percentage is that you're able to receive in the annuity. So for an 80-year-old, their rate as of the beginning of the year, as of the time that this was recorded, was 6.9%. So if it's a $100,000 gift, they will be able to receive $6,900 every year for the rest of their life. And the residuum of that account, which the expectation is in the aggregate, it's going to be half of that original gift, will go to the charitable cause that you care about. This next slide gives you a few more of the different age brackets. You can set it up as an individual or you can set it up as a two-person. The minimum that we do is about $10,000, or the minimum is $10,000. The max we do is not a tremendously high number. We don't do a $500,000 charitable gift annuity. But if we were wanting to do that, then we would set up a charitable remainder unit trust. These are good for $20,000, $40,000, $50,000 contributions, and you can see on here the current rates as of when this was recorded. One of the things that I often hear about from individuals is they want to take advantage of the change of our tax program with the standard deduction being raised, but they want to make a difference. So I remember as I was pastoring in 2017, I had multiple parishioners who chose at the very end of 2017 to clump their gifts. So they clumped their giving. So they gave 2017 year's gifts, and they pre-gave to the local congregation 2018 year's gifts, and did it all in 1 year. It was allowing them to take advantage of their charitable giving in their tax calculations and to make a difference in that local church. Well, that's something that we can facilitate through what's called a donor advised fund. A donor advised fund is in some ways like a charitable bank account that can be used in our partnership with you to support your local church or to support other charitable causes. And it's really where you give a larger resource, a larger gift at one point in time. You're able to take advantage of the higher deduction in your taxes. And then you can prepare for how we give to different causes. So some people put money into the donor advised fund in a cash gift. And as my understanding, this year of 2020, this would be a great consideration, given that they have changed the tax law such that you can, if you give a cash gift, you can itemize a larger percentage of it in comparison to what normally happens. Normally, it's a set percentage of your adjusted gross income. But this year, my understanding, you need to talk with your accountant, but my understanding is it is 100% of your adjusted gross income is allowable for giving charitably in a cash gift. So this might be a great year to load up a donor advised fund if you have a resource, either a cash gift or a charitable, a gift of a stock transfer. But that pool of resources would be in the account, and then you can either give us direction by email or written communication to say, I want to support these different ministries with this amount of money, and we'll make those distributions. Or we even have some families who set up a specific plan. So they have a schedule, a plan of how they want to make distributions through the course of the year. And for some of the families, they'll give 3 years or 5 years worth of charitable giving in 1 year, allowing them to take the deduction in when they give it, and then spread out those charitable giving, the giving to the different charitable causes over the course of multiple years. Here's a graphic that I have. So the blue dot is the person making the gift, and the gift comes to the foundation. A cash gift, stock gift, grain, lots of different options could be the means of funding it. Now, it can't be funded by the qualified charitable distribution. The IRS does not allow that we were talking about earlier. But of a lot of other resources that we have, you can make a gift into a donor advised fund. You could do a qualified charitable distribution into a permanent fund, which we'll get to in a moment, but not into the donor advised fund. So this illustration I gave here, one person who, this would be, for instance, a single person who normally gives about $12,000. Well, just over $12,000 is where the standard deduction is for an individual. So had they given $12,000 each of these 3 years, they would not actually be able to itemize unless they have a lot of other things that are itemized in their schedule. But related to charitable giving, if they clump their giving, so 3 years worth of giving in 1 year, assuming they have that resource and available to do that, you'll be able to get a charitable receipt for the $36,000, and then we can, in partnership with you, make those distributions to your church or to a camp or to a school. We can support any 501c3 in Kansas or beyond. We want half of it to go to United Methodist Ministries, but we can give to other non-United Methodist 501c3s as well. But as you see, the person will do a standard deduction on their own taxes for years 2021 and 2022, and we, on behalf of them, will make the distributions to the different charitable causes. It's a way to maximize and have the most tax advantage dollars giving and going farther for the things that you care about and want to support. So here's an illustration. Maybe it's to your church, some other tax exempt 501c3, a camp. Maybe it's through the program that we facilitate, a Pathways for Discipleship. Lots of different options through the donor advised fund. Something that's very similar to this, the donor advised fund is more operational while you're living, although we do have some families that have a plan for what happens in the event that they were to die, how we would still fulfill what we would do with the remainder of the donor advised fund. Some of them choose to have a plan, and then we just continue to work that plan until the money is fully deployed. Another consideration is to whatever is remaining of the donor advised fund goes into a permanent fund, and maybe your IRA or your trust or your will add additional dollars that might go to a permanent fund. So we do a permanent kind of fund that cares for, this is a big part of what we do, is we become the legacy caretaker for charitable gifts of faithful United Methodists across the state of Kansas, to help support your local church or a school, to help make a scholarship available, to help support a ministry of that captures your heart. And we make them up so they can be enduring. We have a couple folks who say we don't want it to be permanent. We want it to live for 20 years or 30 years, allowing it to give out a little bit more money every year to make a bigger difference, and not be a perpetual thing. So there's a variety of ways that this can happen, and it can go to support multiple different causes. I think the persons that we work with that give advisement often say to focus on a few more so than many, unless there are pretty significant resources. I often encourage people to think about what will be the annual distribution that will come to those causes from your gift and your resource. But this is a large part of what we will do. We can work with families and be that long-term steward and trustee of those resources, a reliable option for caring for donor intent, making sure the resource is invested well and professionally managed and deployed in a way that aligns with your desires. So here's an example of a person who is choosing to make a charitable gift, to push their values into the future, to give a gift of a lifetime. And so upon their death, in some fashion, maybe from IRA or some other vessel, some means, they are giving a $100,000 gift to the foundation. We've already set up the agreement, the memorandum of understanding, to give us direction of how to care for this gift. And then we make distributions. And we normally make them, especially for a permanent fund, on a sustainable long-term distribution policy. That means we take a specific percentage, irregardless of the markets going up or down. We're investing for the long term, and we deploy the money in a long-term fashion. And often we'll do, our current practice is 4% of a 3-year rolling average of the fund. And so you average out the last 3 years, its performance, and you make a 4% distribution. My desire is to move that towards 5%, which other foundations are doing as well. Here more recently, we've had market challenges, and so maybe it has been a good thing that we've been at 4%. It's been preserving the fund a little bit better. But the desire is to give out a set percent over a course of time, and we can give distributions to the different ministries that you ask us to, that we set up in the agreement. What's nice is for a lot of folk, they can create this means of charitable giving. Maybe it's a tithe of your estate, or maybe it's a child's worth, or depending on your situation, a bigger amount. We care for this resource and become the sole point of distribution. And then if something happens with one of the charitable beneficiaries, the charities that we are supporting, we can redirect it. What I like is we set up these donor advised memorandums with individuals and get something established. And then maybe 5 years later, they change the mind. You don't have to go and get your estate documents redrafted or restated or amended through an attorney. We simply can change this document in our partnership with you. It won't cost you anything, and you can change it to serve your needs as you so desire at that point in time. And so I like that it is adaptable, and we're able to serve long-term your intent. There are some charitable causes that I might want to support, but what happens if they're not there? Well, I can put into the document, if this ministry is not still there, still functioning, I want the money to go here instead. We can also even put in there some advisement. For instance, maybe it's going to your local church, and what you really are passionate about is a particular ministry of the congregation. So you might draft it to go to my United Methodist local church, with first preference going towards um, children and youth, or discipleship ministries, whatever it might be. You can give some directive, but also have some latitude that if that no longer is needed and no longer meets the needs of that local church, they can use it in a more adaptive way. Sometimes what the future church needs may not be what the church needs. What the church needs now may not be what the future church needs. And so creating a process so that you can empower them to use the resources you've given them to make disciples of Jesus Christ, to transform the world around us, to make a lasting difference. That's what's vital. So the last thing I think is just to think about how you can leave a legacy. There's been some research that's done in Kansas through the Kansas Health Foundation and Wichita State University. They published this a few years ago, but it was talking about the transfer of wealth in the state of Kansas, that it's quite significant. They were saying that almost by 2065 was the time, and I think they did the original research in 2010, but by 2065, there will be almost $600 billion transfer from one generation to the next in the state of Kansas. And as United Methodist, currently, we have about 4.8% of all the population in Kansas. And it makes me wonder and dream what would happen if each of us were to consider leaving a charitable gift, taking the resources that we've been entrusted by God through our work and through our families and through our faithfulness and investing, and placing a portion of it into God's hands, saying, God, I give this part of I give on a regular basis. I give when there's a special capital need in the life of my congregation or in my conference. And I also want to give this gift. When I come to the end of my life and I no longer need this money, I want to be a blessing for those who will come after me. For most of us, we've been blessed by people who've gone before us and have shaped our lives and have invested in us. And there comes a time when it's our turn as well. And so I think, how do we do that? My encouragement is to think about at least a tithe. I went and met with one of the parishioners of my last church where I was serving, and was talking with them about what would it look like if they considered giving a tithe of their estate. And the family actually said, well, actually, we're not planning to give a tithe. We're planning to give a child's worth. They have 3 children, and they're planning to give 1/4 to each of those 3 children and 1/4 to the charitable causes that they care about, their church and some other ministries that they care about. For others, they can maybe even do more. I think it's thinking about how we can give a gift of a lifetime. And once we come to discern what that looks like, and we don't know what it's going to be, that's why I often advocate for a percentage for folk. We don't know what resources we'll have when we come to the end of our lives. But to think about, of what we have now, what would that mean for us to consider? As you see on the slide, you can give a bequest through your will or through your trust. Maybe you write those in, a certain dollar amount or a certain percentage or the remainder, whatever it might be, so that you can fulfill this 10% of your total estate or some other number. If you are using some other instruments, so like if you're using a life insurance policy or an IRA, maybe you have a traditional IRA. The document that governs those resources is not your will and trust. It's actually the designated beneficiary. Now, you may put the designated beneficiary form and instruct it to say, give it to your will or give it to your estate or give it to your trust. But you need to make sure all those different documents are aligned so that you can actually accomplish what you want to support the different things that you care about. On this next slide, I have here some different resources, and I think whatever resource you have that you want to use to make a lasting difference is a wonderful resource. So um, I'm going to talk about if a person has all of these different resources, an IRA, they have land, they have taxable stocks that are in an investment account, or they have a life insurance policy. Which of these are the best gifts to give? Um, if you don't have some of them, then I think you think about what do you give of what you have to make a difference and to leave a lasting legacy. But if you had all of these, the best one to give of these to a charitable cause is a qualified IRA plan. The reason is that resource will still be persons, whoever receives it will have to pay tax. So if it's given to a child, an IRA is given to a child, that child will have to pay tax on it. And in fact, based on the Secure Act that was signed in late 2019, they'll have to receive the distribution from that IRA within a window of 10 years. There are certain situations where that doesn't happen, but for many folk, they'll have to take it over 10 years when that might not be the best thing for them. They don't need the money at that time. So if you had all these resources, the one that is first to be considered to use as a charitable gift to fulfill your tithe gift or whatever it might be ought to be an IRA. A land would be a great gift to give. However, a land also has a step up in basis at the time of death. So if I die and I have a quarter of ground or a section of ground, it has a step up in basis such that my children could choose to sell it and not have to pay the capital gains that I would have to pay if I were to sell it prior to my death. Same for stocks. They have a step up in tax basis. Life insurance, there's maybe a few scenarios that do, but most life insurance policies, there is no tax on the beneficiary receiving of those dollars. So that'd be a great gift to give to children or to other family members. It really depends on what resources you have and what you want to do to make a difference, and to think about how you can help your resources go the farthest to make the biggest amount of good in various ways. So this next slide has a person who has $500,000 as their total estate. They have $450,000 in property, and they give that to their children. And they have an individual retirement account of $50,000, which is a tithe of their total estate, and they give that to their church. There's no estate tax, there's no income tax, and they can make a difference. We can help you process some of this and create the documents that would be helpful. We also offer a service, which is an estate planning service to help families. I find that sometimes families want to give charitably, but they have a complexity of their resources, and so they need to get a plan put in place that they're comfortable with, that is life-giving for them. They need to have that settled, and then they'll think about how they might give a charitable gift. And so we, through the foundation, partner with Stewardship Counseling and an attorney who's a specialist in this area. His name is John Griffin, and he works with families. He actually doesn't draft, for the most part, he doesn't draft the documents as an attorney drafting them, but more so works as an architect, if you will, to build a plan, and then he will partner with an attorney that you already have or an attorney that he can help you find to draft the documents, to do the things that will make a difference in your life and your resources so that you can bless your children or your other family members, and that you can leave a lasting legacy to make a difference. He works for us. We have a relationship with him, and he serves the foundation, and we'd be happy to find a way to connect you to him. Some of the situations that I think he's the best is when they're a little more complex, and we'd be honored to visit with you about is it right for you to work with John, or are there other options to serve you well? And so please let us know how we can do that. Folks, all this that we're talking about is how you and I, as faithful disciples of Jesus Christ, who have been blessed by God, who have resources that have been entrusted to us and that we're responsible for. It's how do we use them in life and in death to make a difference, to serve their neighbor, to make disciples of Jesus Christ, to change lives, to transform the world around us. It's about the impact. It's about using the resources to help young people discover Jesus Christ in their life, to find mission and purpose and ministry that they're used to help those persons who are hungry and who are lost, to help our churches thrive. I think God gives us all that we need to be the church that God calls us to be. And we have it. It's about us. It's about us having a process, trusting, building relationships, and then choosing joyfully and generously to use the resources that we've been entrusted to make a lasting difference. I hope this has been helpful for you. You can see our contact information for us for the foundation. You can go onto our website. We've got some videos and a lot of resources. We've got a page called Ways to Give that outlines some of these different things. And that's what our work is about, is helping you as individuals and helping congregations develop programs so that we might leave a lasting legacy. I invite you to pray about how you can use what you have been entrusted to make a difference, to change lives of those who are a part of the church and the community, and for those who will come after you. Let us pray. Gracious God, pour out your Spirit upon us. Give us the courage to better understand our options, to maximize how we can make a difference in the life of our church and in our communities. We long to change a life, and sometimes it's one person at a time, and to bless a community and change a community, bring transformation to the communities in which we live, the faith communities that we're a part of, to bring life to Kansas and to help us thrive, to help us to be the church to be a beacon of hope and light to the world around us, and to fulfill the mission and purpose that you placed in our individual lives, our congregations' lives, upon the life of the church. We pray your blessing upon us in Jesus' name. Amen. It's our honor to work with you through the Kansas Area United Methodist Foundation. Again, my name's Dustin Petz. Please contact us. We'd be honored to serve you. Thank you so much.